Okay, let's try to unpack this. If you've been following the current government shutdown, you might feel like you're just running into a wall of conflicting information.
Yeah, it's pretty chaotic out there.
I mean, even the top political commentators seem to be struggling to make a call. Look at CNN just this week. First, they had a piece something like, Democrats may have overplayed their hand.
Right, I saw that one.
Then, almost immediately, the headline shifted to, the government shutdown is a slow-boil political crisis. More cautious? Mm-hmm. And then a third piece saying, Democrats could have more shutdown leverage than people realize. So, which is it?
It's true. That confusion really underscores how, well, unique this particular shutdown is.
Yeah.
It's not just a typical standoff. There are an unusual number of moving parts, and the motives are all over the place.
So what's our plan here?
Our mission today is really to untangle the three main political groups driving this crisis. It's like a high-stakes three-way standoff. And then we want to dive into two really crucial related news stories about executive power and social policy that are kind of getting lost in the noise.
Okay, but before we jump into the politics, maybe let's quickly nail down two important details from the source material just to get the basics right for everyone listening.
Good idea.
First, if you're a federal employee working without pay right now, the news isn't all bad.
Yeah.
You are generally guaranteed back pay.
Yeah, that's thanks to the Government Employee Fair Treatment Act of 2019. And that guarantee, it carries a lot of political weight.
Meaning?
Well, Congress could theoretically vote to reverse it, but our sources suggest that be seen as a bridge too far for most members, on either side, consider pretty unlikely.
Got it. And the second point?
The second nuance involves that recent vote to just sort of kick the can down the road, the temporary funding extension.
Right, the short-term funding bill, what we call a continuing resolution, or CR, basically keeps the lights on without settling the big arguments.
Exactly. On that CR vote, which was mostly along party lines, there was one Republican crossover that caught our eye. Rand Paul of Kentucky.
Just one.
Just one. But that single defection is worth watching, because as leadership keeps staging these votes, the moment another member flips, well, that'll be treated as a huge deal. A sign that someone's resolve is cracking.
Which brings us nicely to the three corners of this standoff. I'm picturing that famous scene, at the end of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah, the cemetery shootout.
Exactly. Blondie, Angel Eyes, Tuco, all pointing guns. Nobody wants to shoot first because the third guy might get him.
That's a pretty good analogy for Washington right now. Only the players are, let's say, the Trump administration, congressional Republican leadership, and congressional Democrats.
Okay, let's break that down. Corner one.
Corner one is really the engine of this whole thing. The Trump administration and his allies, particularly OMB Director Russ Vought, the sources are pretty clear. They see this shutdown less as a crisis and more as an opportunity.
An opportunity for what?
To gut parts of the government, punish opponents, maybe delay some headaches like the full Epstein files release.
And this is where Project 2025 fits in. The Heritage Foundation plan.
Precisely. The former president used to say he knew nothing about it, remember?
Right.
But now he's openly embracing it. He even posted on social media about meeting with Vought, calling him he of Project 2025 fame to figure out which agencies to hit.
Wow. Okay. And Project 2025, remind us, the key mechanism is?
The big one here is resurrecting Schedule F. That's the plan to strip job protections from potentially thousands of federal workers by relabeling them as policymakers.
Which means they could be fired basically at will, no cause needed.
Exactly. It turns the civil service from, a stable institution into something much more politically controllable.
And the enthusiasm for this. Senator Mike Lee actually said Vought has been dreaming about this moment since puberty.
Yeah, that quote tells you a lot about the mindset, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And we're seeing the punitive actions already, often aimed at places seen as Democratic strongholds.
Like what? Give us examples.
Okay, so they froze $18 billion already earmarked for infrastructure in New York City. The reason given? Unconstitutional DEI principles.
DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So they're saying federal money can't support those ideas.
That's the administration's line, yeah. They also canceled almost $8 billion in green energy grants. These went to 16 different states.
And let me guess.
Yep. By what the sources called a remarkable coincidence, all 16 of those states voted for Kamala Harris in 2024.
So surgically targeted. But how, legally, how can Vought just freeze funds like that during a shutdown? Isn't there some check?
Not an immediate one, apparently. During a shutdown, agencies have super strict spending limits. Vought seems to be interpreting those limits in the most, let's say, aggressive and politicized way possible, using the lack of new funding authority as an excuse to freeze money that was already allocated but hadn't quite gone out the door yet.
A sledgehammer approach.
Definitely. And you see it in the messaging, too. Federal departments forced to put up these partisan web banners blaming Democrats. They even tried to use employee out-of-office messages for political spin.
Wait, isn't that a Hatch Act violation, using government resources for politics?
It certainly raises major Hatch Act concerns. But according to our sources, HUD Secretary Scott Turner just shrugged it off, said he's not worried at all.
Wow, that attitude.
It really underscores the weaponization idea. But, they can't perfectly aim the pain. The Farm Service Agency, the FSA, it's closed. And that hits farmers hard, a key Republican group. So there's collateral damage happening, too.
Okay, that's corner one. What about corner two? Congressional Republican leaders, Johnson and Thune.
They seem to be taking a kind of Switzerland-ish posture, maybe, mostly throwing up their hands.
Why?
They know neither Trump nor the Democrats are likely to cave easily.
Yeah.
So their main tactic seems to be damage control and staging these show votes. Votes designed to fail, but let them blame Democrats and shape the narrative.
And what are they saying publicly?
Speaker Johnson claimed he has quite literally have nothing to negotiate, which sounds like passing the buck. He also claimed Vought is making these cuts reluctantly.
Reluctantly, after the Mike Lee quote about puberty.
Exactly. It's an obvious falsehood, contradicts Vaught's own enthusiasm for Project 2025, but Johnson's real view might have slipped out when a Democrat confronted him. He reportedly said, referring to Trump, "I don't control him."
A tacit admission he's not really in charge of the strategy here.
Pretty much, yeah. Sark admission.
Okay, so that leaves corner three. Congressional Democrats. Jeffries and Schumer.
Right. They might get blamed for the shutdown itself, which is never popular.
Yeah.
But they seem to be making a calculated stand.
On what grounds?
They believe it's justified because they're fighting for something wildly popular: healthcare subsidies. Specifically, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare subsidies. Public polls show those have like 70% plus support.
So use an unpopular tactic for a popular cause. That's the strategy.
That seems to be the gamble. And it's risky, but potentially smart. They also have a pretty potent messaging tool, an ace up your sleeve, you could say.
Which is?
They're using Trump's own words against him, digging up footage from 2013 where he said, shutdowns are a tremendously negative mark on the President of the United States. He's the one that has to get people together.
Ouch. Turning his own logic back on him.
Exactly. And the polling, at least so far, seems to suggest it might be working. That Washington Post poll found 47% blame Trump and Republicans, only 30% blame Democrats.
What the pressure's going to build, right?
Absolutely. We're watching key dates. October 15th is a big one. That's when SNAP benefits, food stamps are expected to run out. Federal courts will start slowing down significantly, too.
And then there's the historical marker.
Right. If this goes on until November 4th, it becomes the longest shutdown in U.S. history, breaking Trump's own record from his presidency.
So how does this end? What are the possible exits?
Our sources point to three main possibilities. One, someone just completely caves, outright capitulation. Seems least likely right now.
Right.
Two, Republicans could, in theory, kill the filibuster just for funding bills, create a specific carve-out, technically possible, but a huge political gamble with massive fallout.
Also seems unlikely.
Probably. Which leaves three, seen as the most likely path right now. Democrats agree to another short-term CR vote, but only in exchange for a firm binding promise from the GOP to actually negotiate those ACA subsidies later. Kick the can again, but with a promise attached.
Okay, so that's the standoff. But while that's churning, you mentioned other big stories happening in parallel.
Yeah, let's pivot to part two. These are deep dives with potentially huge long-term implications. First, there's this really powerful conversation bubbling up about what pro-life even means in today's politics.
Sparked by the Pope.
Exactly. Pope Leo XIV made some remarks about a proposed award for Senator Dick Durbin, who is Catholic but also pro-choice. And the Pope used it to push for a much broader definition of morality.
What did he say specifically?
He basically said, diplomatically but firmly, that if someone says, I'm against abortion, but they're also in favor of the death penalty or in favor of the inhuman treatment of immigrants, then they're not really pro-life.
Wow. That directly challenges the narrow political definition, doesn't it? He's saying it has to be a consistent ethic, pro all lives.
That's the core of it, a comprehensive morality. And this whole idea of kind of moral jurisdiction is playing out in legal jurisdiction battles, too.
Oh, so?
Look at the fight between Louisiana and California. Louisiana's Attorney General demanded California arrest a doctor, Remy Coito, for prescribing abortion pills across state lines.
And California's response?
Immediate legislative action. They passed a new law allowing doctors to prescribe these medications anonymously. A direct countermove.
So a state-level fight over who controls access to reproductive health care, even across borders.
Right. And what's fascinating is how this battle over geographic jurisdiction connects to, like, the digital jurisdiction over your personal health data.
Which brings us to the Oura Ring, the health tracker.
Exactly. There's this dual news about Oura. These rings track lots of things, including menstrual cycles, which means they could potentially indicate a pregnancy or, theoretically, a termination.
Okay, so what was the news?
Two things hit at once. First, Aura's biggest customer, the U.S. Department of Defense.
The military uses them.
Yep. And second, key parts of the Oura Ring are made by a company owned by Peter Thiel.
The billionaire tech investor, known for his strong Magier ties.
The very same. So you have this convergence, health tracking technology, potential pregnancy data, a major government contract, and ownership linked to a very specific political faction.
That sounds alarming for privacy advocates.
It is, and it's reportedly driving many women to literally throw away their devices. They're worried about data privacy, about health data potentially being accessed or even criminalized by politically hostile groups, especially given the Thiel connection.
A chilling intersection of tech, politics, and personal health. Okay, what's the second deep dive?
Segment B focuses on the Supreme Court and a huge looming fight over the independence of federal agencies. Specifically, the case involving Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook.
The Fed. This is about presidential power to fire people at independent agencies.
Exactly. It's a major test of a 90-year-old precedent called Humphrey's Executor. Quick refresher. That case established Congress can limit the president's power to fire heads of independent agencies like the Fed. They can only be fired for cause, not just for political reasons.
Why is that important?
It's meant to ensure institutional stability, especially for agencies that need insulation from pure politics, like the Fed managing the economy. Prevents complete political capture.
Okay, so what happened with Lisa Cook?
Trump tried to fire her. She was appointed by Biden. The stated reason was alleged mortgage fraud from way before she even joined the Fed.
Sounds pretextual, like they were looking for a reason.
It certainly appears that way. The charge seems flimsy. But the attempt itself has huge implications for the Fed's independence.
And how did the Supreme Court handle it?
This is where it gets interesting. They took a notably different approach compared to similar recent cases about firing agency heads. Trump asked for an emergency stay, basically, permission to fire her immediately while the case proceeds.
And the court said?
They didn't grant it. They didn't deny it either. They deferred the request, pushed the decision off until oral arguments, which aren't scheduled until January 2026.
2026? That's a long deferral. Why is that significant?
It's huge. It seems small, but it effectively means Trump has to wait until after the next election. And crucially, it lets Lisa Cook stay on the Fed board and participate in all the upcoming interest rate decisions for the next year plus.
So the court might be worried about
Right.
market stability?
That seems to be the signal, yes. They seem to view the independence of the Federal Reserve, arguably the world's most critical financial institution, differently than, say, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau director, where they previously allowed a similar removal. It suggests they might see the Fed as uniquely needing protection from political interference because of the economic stakes.
But what's the argument the administration is making to justify firing her for cause?
This is where it gets really dangerous for the rule of law, potentially. The Solicitor General, John Sauer, is arguing that the for-cause standard is met simply by the appearance of a lack of integrity.
Wait, just the appearance? Even if the accusations aren't true?
That's the argument, that the mere public accusation, even if baseless or politically motivated, is enough to meet the for-cause standard for firing someone from an independent board.
That would basically gut the whole idea of for cause, wouldn't it? A president could just make up an accusation.
It would essentially allow pretextual firings based on political smears. Cook's lawyer, naturally, argues the opposite, that removing her would destabilize financial markets, which seems to be the point the court picked up on with its delay.
So the court's delay is like a temporary shield, maybe?
Possibly. It's a small, unusual step, but it might be the first real test of whether the court has the institutional will to protect these critical independent bodies when faced with direct political pressure or if they'll eventually find a rationale to accommodate the president's demands.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. What does this all mean for you, the listener?
Well, when you look across everything we've discussed, the shutdown fight fueled by Project 2025, the Pope challenging definitions of morality, the Supreme Court's hesitation on the Fed, it all circles back to the same core issues: the limits of executive power, and whether our institutions are resilient enough to withstand being weaponized for partisan ends.
And it's not abstract stuff.
Not at all. This complex fight has immediate real-world consequences for you. The shutdown's impact is only going to grow. It's going to affect food stamps via SNAP. It could affect your healthcare enrollment if ACA subsidies get caught in the crossfire. These aren't just DC arguments. They hit home.
It really feels like all these different conflicts are pushing the boundaries, testing the checks and balances we thought were solid.
That's right. And the ultimate question raised by all this, really, is whether certain core institutions, maybe like the Federal Reserve, maybe even like a broad concept of morality like the Pope talked about, are truly safe from being turned into political weapons. Or does every check and balance just have a price, a breaking point that will eventually be tested?
And that Supreme Court move on the Lisa Cook case.
Yeah, what does that small, unusual step of delaying the decision really suggest about the future? Is it a sign of strength for institutional independence, or just kicking the can down the road until after an election changes the dynamics? That's definitely something to think about this week.